I'm not a Jordan Peterson fan. I find his views on Christianity and religion in particular to be incomprehensible in an otherwise apparently intelligent man. And he refuses to be pinned down on it, which is frustrating, because I'd like to know what he actually thinks in this instance. But he did perform well in this interview on Channel 4 that he had, running rings around the presenter and refusing to be pinned down, which is the thing that frustrates me about his religion. So it was interesting to watch how someone could tackle someone in that situation, and it possibly lends itself to some arguing tactics with social justice warrior types in the future. Like I say, I don't really agree with Peterson on very much at all. I find his worship of traditionalism and his bootstraps thinking antithetical to what I want to happen. I want men to develop a broader, more encompassing, more accepting definition of manhood in a way that women have managed to broaden the definition of womanhood. It seems like women have gained a huge amount of scope and possibility in what they can do and still be considered whole and complete women. They can go for the career, they can go for the home. Might get a bit of criticism from radical feminists if you do that, but by and large, whatever choice a woman makes in her life, by and large, it's accepted, celebrated and understood. But there's still a tremendous amount of social pressure, financial pressure, and other, even political pressure upon men to fulfill that same traditional role they always have without extending their role, and with that role being encroached upon. Which is all well and good, but without other outlets it's necessarily going to lead to conflict. So when he tells men to just pick themselves up, sort themselves out, whatever, I find that profoundly unhelpful and not to be working towards the goal that I want. It's necessary, unfortunately, always in this day and age to put a disclaimer in front of things if you don't agree with someone, before you say anything positive about them. So that's that out of the way. So Peterson, going into that interview, I think had the advantage, because either Channel 4 hadn't done their research on him, or they just hadn't understood who or what he was or what his positions were. I mean, he's conservative for my taste, but I would still consider him primarily to be a liberal. Probably he's centre-left mostly in his points of view. Like I say, I find him a bit too conservative for me, but then I'm a left-wing extremist. But they seem to be expecting him to be some kind of bigot, some kind of right-wing demagogue, to be all these alt-right accusations that have been levelled at him when he quite obviously isn't. And by defying those expectations, he kept the interviewer on the back foot, and that was very effective, as was being patient and polite and wryly humorous. I sometimes try to be polite to people I'm arguing with, but it's not necessarily the winning move. Different tactics work for different people. Ridicule can get someone to prickle and try to defend the indefensible. You can apply logic, reason and evidence. You can be bullish, you can be polite. In this situation it worked, I think, because it was a televised interview. So she wasn't really in a position where she could shout him down, as we've seen happen at talks and protests and things that he's been at. And so because of the nature of the interview, because of the way it was set up, he was able to challenge and explain himself in a way that doesn't occur in other contexts and situations, even YouTube debates and so on, debates. So that was to his advantage as well. And because her preconceptions were so completely at odds with the man as he exists, she couldn't land a blow. I found that fascinating, and I wish we could transfer that into other arguments that we have online. I mean, with text you can go back and forth, but people just blithely ignore it. With a TV interview, there's presentation to things. The thing is, Peterson is, even though I don't agree with all his principles, he is a principled man, and he's arguing on points of principle. And there's those principles are hard to argue against, that people should be free, that people shouldn't be forced, that people shouldn't be oppressed, that people shouldn't be silenced or censored. These are very hard things to argue for, and when you try to argue for them, you tend to look ridiculous, as she did, saying don't people have a right to not be offended, which is just absurd. There is no right to not be offended. It's just nonsense. The other main thing that I really noticed was that time and time again she took any generalized statement to mean a broad sweeping statement. So if you say something like women are shorter than men, obviously that's hashtag not all women. Some women are taller than some men, but as a broad demographic, speaking generally, it's true that men tend to be taller than women. But she couldn't seem to get that, and kept making that same mistake over and over again, and being corrected over and over again, and as a result ended up looking stupid and back-footed over and over again. But this is also something that we see in a lot of arguments. If a feminist debater, argumentator, Twitter harpy, whatever, says men are violent, we're just supposed to accept that, and yeah, that's where making fun of not all men comes from. But you make a generalization about women, and that's not allowed to pass without vitriol and attack and so on. So you're allowed to say men are violent, you can't say the opposite, that women tend to be more passive, without it being taken to mean that you mean everyone. It's just... it's such a simple thing, and it's such an integral thing to understand in statistics and demography and so on. And yet all of these ideologues never seem to grasp it or its meaning. And that makes argumentation very difficult. But yeah, I was pretty impressed. I still don't agree with him on much, but as far as that went, I think he made his points. I just wish he hadn't had to make them again and again and again and retread the same ground over and over. But maybe there's some lessons to be learned here. Don't allow people to label you things that you're not. Challenge it at every turn. And in some instances, you know, politeness and perseverance and patience can work. Not always, but quite often. And if something is silly, laugh, but also demonstrate why it's silly. Zang. Postmortem Studios sells a wide variety of stock art, well over 500 pieces, many of them by RPG industry veteran Brad McDevitt. These are available for you to use in your personal or professional projects, whether stories or games or anything else. Check us out at rpgnow.com.